Folks, I hope you are good. We are going to quickly take a look at what you just kind of read about the tidings of McDuffie and the experience of Filipinx folks in the United States, right? When we look at the Chinese Exclusion Act, we saw a group of people being excluded from being considered American. I think the importance of the Tiding-McDuffie Act is how it functions in unmaking a group of people who were considered American, right? And so let's first start out by just remembering a couple of key things, right? That um, the founders conceived that when new territory was acquired, that the people in that territory would become American nationals, with also with the chance of that territory becoming a state. Many of the states in the United States, that was the process. It was taken, right, either through purchase or through violence, whether it was from natives or from Mexico. Territory was taken, right? And over time, these territories became states. So that's kind of that concept of the founders, the Empire of Liberty. The problem was with the territories, the kind of imperial desires at the turn of the 20th century for the United States, in taking the territories from Spain, Puerto Rico, Philippines. That was oftentimes shaped by kind of ethno-state desires for empire, right? And so these two concepts kind of collided and contradicted each other. The idea that you would treat a group of people you see yourself superior to as equal to you, right? So you have um, uh, Filipinos both in the Philippines and in the United States. And from the white dominant perspective, they viewed the Filipino body through the lens of a kind of white man's burden, right? And that white man's burden was an idea, a narrative that uh, bestowed superiority on white Anglo-American men, right? White man's burden, right? So it's both racialized and gendered concept. Um, and perceived Americans, white Anglo men, as superior to all other beings, right? I don't think in the reading I have this image, and it may not be big enough for you to see here, but I would recommend for y'all to take a look at this on a bigger, as a bigger image. It's a political cartoon called The White Man's Burden, and what you see is Uncle Sam carrying. Uh, and if you read when you if you look at it bigger, you'll see that there's people in the basket and they have different countries on them. Cuba, right? They're supposed to represent kind of Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Uncle Sam is carrying them over boulders that say things like oppression, ignorance, vice, superstition, and walking up towards. You see at the top of that hill, there's this like kind of more golden statue with open arms. That's a civilization, right? So the concept of white man's burden perceived those what we would call, by today's language, the global south, those in developing countries, as somehow inferior, and America and Americans, particularly white Anglo-Saxon men, as the superior beings that will pull you out of ignorance, out of oppression, into civilization. So the white man's burden is deeply steeped in white supremacy, right? And you might be hearing this idea and you're like, yo, that sounds kind of like Manifest Destiny. And you wouldn't be wrong, right? These are just evolutions of similar ideas that are, I would argue, settler colonial manifestations. The way in which settler colonists view themselves above everyone else and how it's their burden or they've been tapped by some sort of providence, God, or whatever to civilize the quote uncivilized world, right? And so it's through this lens that Filipinx folks are being viewed, both those that are in the United States and those who are in the Philippines as a territory of the United States, right? And so how can you, right, this concept initially with the conquest of the Philippines, Filipinos are American nationals. They are essentially equal. Yet the white man burden says, no, you are superior to these people. So the concepts of supremacy are mutually exclusive to the concept of equality. You can't have both those concepts living side by side. You're either superior. If you hold the concept that you're superior. You cannot hold the concept that you are equal to, right? So what happens? Over time, you have the passage of the Tidings-McDuffie Act, which grants independence to the Philippines, but that was in part that resistance that was taking place in the Philippines made it harder for the United States to hold on to the territory, but also this idea that if you are equal to them and they're your territory, then you must treat them as equals and as Americans. That became problematic for many Americans, and independence for the Philippines seemed to answer multiple issues. Let them be free, so we don't have to deal with their resistance anymore, and let them be free, so we don't have to treat them equally anymore, right? And so the Tiding-McDuffie Act is decouples American identity from the Filipino body, right? You're unmaking somebody American. This was a group of people who were by law at one point American. Now you're using law to make them non-Americans, ultimately turning them into quote aliens, aka immigrants, right? So here's a group of people who are American. You've made them immigrant. They didn't come as immigrants. You made them into immigrants, right? So it's important to understand again this concept of immigration and who's an American. We talk about these things as if it's some sort of natural ways, that there's naturally certain people who are American, naturally people who are, no, these are all constructions. The question becomes is how have we constructed it over time and why have we constructed it in that way? Kind of assisting in that process of making Filipinx folks not or make them less American and less equal was the ways in which other narratives were projected onto Filipino bodies, right? So you had black male stereotype of hypersexuality and the Asian stereotype of fixed foreign threat. And both of those were projected onto the Filipinx body to kind of further drive the idea that one, they're not equal to white folks, and two, therefore, not by being fixed foreign threat or not American, but instead something different, an quote alien or immigrant, right? And so I want to make sure that we are clear about what's taking place here. A group of people who were by law American were then by law created into immigrants. So they were unmade Americans. Once American, then you unmake them because it was just simply not to your self-interest. So again, with this again, who is an American? We constantly see the concept of race and ethnicity playing a central role in trying to determine who can be called and who can be included into the nation state of America and be considered American. If you got questions, holler. Peace.